How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Yuzayin, Daf 17 from Masechta Nazir. Friends, today we continue discussing the sugya of a fellow who becomes tameh while he's in a cemetery. And wait, what did I just say? A fellow who proclaims his nazirus while he is already in a cemetery. The first part of the daf, we continue the machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. So let's jump into that. Omer Ma'bar of Ashi says, Ma'bar of Ashi, Meichal Kulam Lo Pliga Dechaylo. Okay, so everybody agrees that he becomes a Nazir, right? Yesterday we wanted to say that there's a machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, that Rabbi Yochanan says that if a fellow is in a cemetery and he proclaims his nazirus while in a cemetery, Rabbi Yochanan says that he becomes a nazir already, just that his nazirus sort of lingers until he becomes tahor, and once he becomes tahor, that is when he starts counting. Whereas Rish Lakish says no, he doesn't become a nazir bichlal, and when he becomes tahor, he could choose to restate his nazirus, but if he doesn't, then he won't be a nazir. We proved at the end of the daf that that's not the case, and that is where we begin today, right? Let's read that again. Actually, everybody agrees. Both Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish agree that when he is in the cemetery and he states and he proclaims his nazirus, he becomes a nazir. Elo ki pliga lemilke. The kasha is, does he get whipped for being tameh? Does he get whipped for being tameh? Fellow is in a cemetery, proclaims to be a nazir. A nazir is not allowed to be tameh. Do we whip him or not? Rabbi Yochanan Sova came the Chayla Loki. Rabbi Yochanan says, since he's in a cemetery, when he proclaims his nazir, since the Chayla, since it is Chal, since he becomes a nazir, Loki. So it's funny. It says lucky, but the truth is he's not so lucky. I'll go upon him. God. Let's not go into evaluating how good of a joke that was. I imagine it's probably pretty clear to everybody. The quality of that humor. They gave him the Chayla Lucky. So Rabbi Yochanan says, look, L'maisa, if we're saying that he's a Nazir, so he gets Malchus. Rish Lakish Sovered Lo Lucky V'Chayla. Rish Lakish says, look, while yes, I agree that if he's in a cemetery and he proclaims his nazirus, he proclaims his desire, his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience. So even though he becomes a Nazir, nonetheless, Lo Lucky, he doesn't get Malchus. Eis Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan Asakash Rish Lakish. Mishnazir V'Beves Akvaris. If a fellow is in a cemetery and he proclaims his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, Afilu Ayasham Shloshim Yom. Even right, this is our Mishnah, right? Even if he hangs out there for 30 days, Ein Olin Lo Min Aminyan. He's not. They don't count towards his nazirus. Ve'enu Mevi Korban Tuma, and he doesn't. When he becomes tahor, he does not bring the korban tumah that a nazir would generally bring. Korban tumah hu delo maisi, and we're saying, yeah, he doesn't bring a korban tumah. Ha milke laki ole, but he would get malchus. The only difference is that he doesn't bring a korban tumah when he becomes tahor, but he would still get whipped for becoming tmei meis. So Rish Lakish would answer, no. But dinu did lisnei enu loke. Really, the Mishnah could have said as well that he does not get malchus. But since we needed to teach later that if he left the cemetery and became tahor, and now he's a nazir and he goes back into the cemetery, so then he would be tameh, and he would have to bring a korban tumah in that case. Tana Reisha enu mevi korban tumah. So the Reisha also mentions that he does not bring a korban tumah in the first case, but in terms of getting malchus, he would also not get malchus. According to Rish Lakish. Tashma, come in here. Ein bein tameh shenazir. Oh, I gotta sneeze. Okay, I'm not sure what I read before I sneezed. So, Tashma, come in here. Ein bein tamei shenazar. There's no difference between a person who is in a cemetery and proclaimed his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, the Nazir Torah Shenitma, to a Nazir who's tahor who became tamei by going into a cemetery. There's no difference between those two scenarios. Ella shetamei shenazar, that a fellow who was in a cemetery and proclaimed his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, Shvi Shalo Odlo Min Aminyan. The 7th day of his purification process counts towards his counting of his Nazir days. Whereas a Nazir who is tahor, who went into a cemetery and became tamei, Ein Shvi Shalo Olelo Min Aminyan. Day 7 of his purification process does not count towards counting his Nazir days. Implying, however, that with regard to lashes for going into the cemetery, both would be equal. And he'd receive lashes in both cases. That is a kasha on Rish Lakish, who would say that he would not receive lashes when he was already in the cemetery when proclaiming his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience. Omar lei, so Rish Lakish says, lo l'tiglachas ze v'ze shavin. No, in terms of getting malchus for shaving, or for getting malchus for drinking wine, both cases are the same. But in terms of avalinian malchus, but in terms of malchus for tmei meis, my zeloke v'ze eino loke. We're saying, I think actually read it as a kasha, right? So avalinian malchus mai zeloke v'ze eino loke. So what, Rish Lakish, you're saying, but in terms of malchus for tuma, in the situation where he's tahor and then goes into the cemetery, he would get malchus. But if he was in the cemetery already when he proclaimed his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, he would not get malchus. L'snaye. Why don't they mention that in the Bryce? Tashma. Wait, where am I? L'snaye b'takante kamayre b'kilkule lo kamari. Look, it was talking about, the fixing, right? It was talking about on the right, Yom Shvi Shelo Olo Min Aminyan. It's talking about positive things, that he could already start talking, counting his days of Nazirus. We're not talking about getting malchus. That's why we don't mention that. Tashma, come in here. Mishaya Tamei V'Nazar. If a fellow was in a cemetery and proclaimed his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, also the galech v'shtosyayin v'tamei lamesim, he cannot shave, cannot drink wine, and cannot become impure to the dead. And if he shaved, or if he drank wine, or if he became impure to the dead, how is it sofik sarboyim? He gets malchus. So tiyuvta. So we see that it is a kasha, right? That it's not just. So we see that even in the situation of a fellow who's in a cemetery and proclaims its intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, he would get malchus for tumas meis. So it's a kasha on Rish Lakish. Says the Gemara, boy Rave asks a kasha, Nazir b'hu b'veis hakvaros. If you have a fellow who's in a cemetery and he proclaims his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, Ma'u b'yishahir l'malchus o lo. Do we say that in order for him to require lashes, he would have to remain in the cemetery for a certain amount of time in order for us to be able to administer lashes for him staying in the cemetery for that amount of time? O lo. Or we say no, forget about waiting any specific amount of time. If he is in the cemetery, we can take out our whips and whip him up. Although I imagine you'd probably have to go to Bezdin, it's not so posh. So what are we talking about? If we're talking about where he's in the cemetery, and prior to proclaiming his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, we warn him, we say, don't do it. You're in a cemetery. And he does it anyways, so what do you have to wait for? He's chayiv malchus. My time elo boy shehiyah, dika masri bey. I'm sorry, I skipped. Lama l'shehiyah. Nazir my time lo boy shehiyah. Dikamasir be. Achanami kamasir be. Right? If you have a Nazir who's tahor and he's about to go into the cemetery, they say, "Yo, bro, don't do it. Don't go into the cemetery. You're going to be Chayiv Malkus." And he goes in. He doesn't have to wait at all. He went into the cemetery when he wasn't supposed to. He was warned he gets Malkus. So here as well, if they warned him, don't do it, and he does it, so what should he have to wait for? He should get Chayiv Malkus. Ella. Rather, it's talking about that he went in some kind of a box. He was in a box. He was enclosed in a box. Okay. And then somebody opened up the floor from under him in the Tumah garden. Do we say that when you have to wait in order to be Chayiv Malkus, so when we say that you have to wait, I think in the Beis Hamikdash is probably Chiyuv Kor. So meaning we're saying that you're not allowed to be Tamei in the Beis Hamikdash. So if you are in the Beis Hamikdash and you're Tahor, and then you would come Tmei Meis somehow in the Beis Hamikdash, so then you're only Chayiv if you wait a certain amount of time. So when we say that you have to wait, so that's Davka in the Beis Hamikdash. Aval Abroi lo. But outside, such as a Nazir in a cemetery, waiting wouldn't apply. Or Dilma lo shnar, maybe there's no difference. Taker, they say Ich weiß nicht. Okay. Fine. Boy Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi asked the following kasha. Nazar vubeves akvaris. So if you have a fellow who's in a cemetery and he proclaims his intention to embark on the 30-day Nazir experience, ton giluach o lo. So when he becomes tahor, do you have to shave him? Right? Meaning, normally if you have a fellow who's a Nazir, and then he becomes Tmei Meis. So when he becomes Tahor, he's got to start all over again. We shave him, and he brings korbanos. So does he have to get shaven or not? Kiboy tiglachas Tahor shenitma. Do we say that when we require shaving, that's dafka Nazir Tahor that became Tamei, to come Tamei the Naziruse? Because he's sort of being Tamei his Nazirus. He's like violating his Nazirus, and therefore he starts all over again. We shave him and everything. Aval Tamei shenozar lo, but that wouldn't apply to somebody who was already in the cemetery when he proclaimed his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience. Maybe it wouldn't apply there. Or maybe also there as well, when he becomes Tahor, we would shave him. Tashma, mishenozar vu beveis hakvaris. If you have a fellow who was in a cemetery and he proclaimed his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, even if he remained there for 30 days, it does not count towards his 30 days that he's counting for Nazirus. And he does not bring a Korban Tumah when he becomes Tahor. Korban Tumah hu dilomaisi aval galuche boy. So we want to argue, okay, so he doesn't bring a Korban Tumah, but he would have to shave. Matam Kamar, to which the Gemara says, not necessarily. Maybe he also does not shave. Maybe what it's saying is, it's giving a rationale. Matam enu maybe Korban Tumah. How come he does not offer the Korbanos of a Nazir Tamei when he becomes Tahor? Mishum de lo bai galuche, because he doesn't require shaving. Because he doesn't require shaving, that's why he also doesn't bring his Korbanos. So it's not to say that Dafki doesn't bring his korbanos, but he does shave. No, Dafki, he doesn't shave. And apparently because he doesn't shave, one is connected to the other. Because he doesn't shave, he doesn't bring the korbanos. Okay? Ta shma. Come and hear le maise. Okay? Ein bein tamei shenazar, the nazir tar shenitma. There's no difference between a fellow who's in a cemetery and proclaims his intention to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, the Nazir Tar Shnidma, to a pure Nazir who's Tahor that became Tamei Ella, Tamei Shenazar, a fellow who's in a cemetery when he proclaims his intent to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, so day 7 of his purification process counts towards his Nazirus. V'nazir Tarush and Itma, whereas a Nazir, a regular Nazir, becomes Tamei, Ein Shvi Shelo Ololo Min HaMinyan. Day 7 does not count towards his Nazirus, my love. Holitiglach Azev Shavin. But we want to say, with regard to everything else, including getting a haircut, they are both equal. Lo Malkis ze vize shavin. No, with regard to getting malkis for being tamei, they are equal. But aval tiglachas mai ze migalech vize eno migalech. So what are we going to say that? But with regard to shaving, so only in the case of a Nazir tahor shenitma he has to shave. But in the case of a fellow who's in a cemetery, when he proclaims his intent to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, he would not have to shave. L'snayes. Then we should mention that in the brisa. Tana shvi shelo b'chol milei. Well, when it mentions that day 7 already counts towards the Nazirus, right? So then it said, when it says day 7, it's referring to day 7 and everything related to it, such as getting a haircut, right? He also wouldn't get a haircut on that day, right? So day 7 already he can start counting from the Nazirus. He doesn't need to get a haircut, as opposed to a regular Nazir who becomes Tameh. Day 7 does not count, and on that day he needs to get a haircut and do all these things. That does not apply to a fellow who is already in a cemetery when he proclaimed his intent to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience. Toshma, come in here. Ainli ella yimei tum also shein od lo min aminyan yimei chaluto minayin. Friends, you hear the kasha? The kasha is, okay, so if you have a Nazir and the Nazir becomes Tameh, so while he's Tameh, it doesn't count towards his Naziris, right? The days of his Tumah do not count towards his Naziris. What if you have a Nazir who gets Tsaras? So the question is, so he doesn't have to start all over again, right? If you have a Nazir who, halfway through his Naziris, it contracts Tsaras, so he doesn't have to start all over again, but we're saying that the time that he's tamei with saras would not count towards his naziris. The question is, how do we know that? Tashma einli ela yimei tumaso shein od lo min aminyan. All I know is that while he's tamei meis, it will not count towards the length of his tumah, of his naziris. While he's tamei meis, it will not count towards his counting his naziris, the days of his naziris. How do I know that also while he has tsaras, that period of tumah does not count towards his naziris? Vidinu, but we say it's logical. Ma yimei tumaso migalechu mevi korbin, just like when he's tamei, just like when he is tamei tumas meis. Migal afterwards, when he becomes tahor, he needs to shave. Umevi korbin, and he also offers a sacrifice. Afimechaluto migalechu mevi korbin. So oichet, when you have a mitzora, when a mitzora becomes tahor, he shaves and he offers a korban. So just like when he's tmei meis, right? Just like when it comes to tmei meis and when it comes to a mitzora, when they become tahor, in both cases they're bringing a korban and they're shaving. So umay yimei tum also in on lo min aminyan. So therefore I'll say that just like the days that he's tmei meis do not count towards his nazir, so oichet afimei chaluto eno olon lo min aminyan. Also the time that he is tamei with tsaras, they would not count towards his naziris. Lo imamad be made to also shekein mevatul boenes hakodmin, which the Gemara says not necessarily, because maybe I'll say that the period in which he's tmei meis is more stringent. They after he's tmei meis, he's got to start all over again. So it's no surprise that the period in which he's tmei meis does not count towards his naziris. That's why it doesn't count towards his naziris. Tomar b'mei chaluto, but you can't compare that to when he's tamei with saras she'eru mevatel es hakodmin, where after he's purified from his saras, however long he's been a nazir until that point remains intact. I'll argue that the days that he was tamei with saras actually would count towards the length of his naziris. Omart umanozir bakever shesayroi roi litiglachas ein olin lo min aminyan, to which we say yes, but in a situation, and the art school pointed out that it doesn't necessarily have to be limited to this specific situation, but in the situation where he was in a cemetery when proclaiming his intent to embark on the 30-day Nazir experience, shesayroi roi litiglachas, that that when he becomes tahor, he's going to have to get the haircut of a Nazir. Ein olden lo min haminyan, and yet it does not count, right? Even though he's going to be cutting his hair within the context of a Nazir, and yet this period does not, right? This period which will ultimately end with him getting a haircut within the context of Naziris, the period does not count towards his Naziris. Yimei chaluto, the days of tzaras, she'ein roy the tiglachas, that at the end of his tzaras period, even though yes, he'll be getting a haircut, but he won't be getting a haircut in the context of Naziris. So he'll be getting a haircut because he's a Metzora who becomes purified. Right? When a Metzora becomes purified, he gets a haircut, he gets shaved. So the shaving that's going to come at the end of his Metzora-ing is going to be on account of being a Metzora, not on account of being a Nazir. So in lo kol shekein she'ein od lo min haminyan, then certainly they should not count towards the Naziris, right? If when he's Timei Mace, where at the end of that period he's going to be shaved within the context of the halachos of a Nazir, and he's being shaved because he's a Nazir who became Timei Mace, and yet that period does not count towards his Nazir period. So certainly by Tsaras, where the shaving has nothing to do with Naziris, then that period should not count towards his Naziris period. My love, Tiglachas Tuma, and it sounds like we are talking about the haircut of the Tuma, right? Meaning when we're talking about the haircut of the Nazir, we're talking about when the Nazir becomes Tahor, right? Meaning from his Tuma, then he will get this haircut, and that's what we're talking about. Lo tiglachas taira. No, we're talking about the haircut that he gets at the end of his 30-day Nazir experience, right? Meaning, because in order for us to make this comparison, it has to be talking about the haircut that he gets at the end of him being tummy, right? Meaning, at the end of the tumah of the tmemes of a Nazir, we're saying that even though he's getting a haircut in the context of Nazirus, right? The haircut that he gets as a Nazir who became tmemes, and we're comparing that to the haircut that he would get as a Metzora at the end of his Tumah. And we're saying, right, my love, Tiglachas Tumah, that we're comparing these two haircuts, the haircuts that they get after Nazir after his period of Tumas Ames, or a Metzora after being a Metzora. Lo Tiglachas Tari, no, forget about it. We're talking about the haircut that he gets when at the end of his 30-day Nazir experience. Ochinam Mistavra, that Taka makes sense. The Sagadaitich Tiglachas Tumah, because if you say that, oh no, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. My love, tiglachas tuma. So this goes back to our original kasha, right? Meaning our original kasha was, if you have a fellow who's in a cemetery, when he proclaims his intent to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, the kasha was, when he becomes tahor again, does he have to does he have to shave? And we see over here, we're saying, my lab tiglachas tuma, that in this brisa, when we're talking about this guy who becomes tmei meis and he's getting a haircut, getting shaved, that's talking about at the end of this period of being tummy. So we see from this brisa that if you have a fellow who's in a cemetery, when he proclaims his intent to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, when he becomes tahor, we seem to be saying that he will shave. Lo tiglachas tari. No, it's not necessarily talking about shaving at the end of this Tuma period when he becomes tahor again. No, it's talking about at the end of his Nazirus bichlal. Hachinam mistavra the sakadaitich Tuma, because if it enters your mind, if it enters your mind that we're talking about the haircut of when he is tameh, right? Meaning when he's in the cemetery, proclaims his intent to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, and then he's tameh, and then he waits 7 days, he becomes tahor. If we're talking about shaving at the end of that, well then yumei chaluto milo by tiglachas. Well, doesn't the Metzora also get shaven at the end of his being Metzora? To which we say lo tiglachas de Naziris. No, but we say that it is talking about the tiglachas tuma. It's talking about so you have this guy, he's in a cemetery, he proclaims his intent to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, he becomes tameh. When he then becomes tahor, then we're talking about when he shaves at that point. And we are and we're saying, but then wouldn't that apply to a fellow who had was a Mitzorah as well? Wouldn't he also be shaving? He says yes, he would be shaving as well, but the difference is that the fellow who's a Nazir and became Tameh, the reason he's shaving is within the context of his being a Nazir. A Nazir becomes Tameh and then he shaves within the context of being a Nazir, whereas when it comes to the Mitzorah, the reason why he's shaving at the end is not because he's a Nazir, but because he's a Mitzorah. And what we're saying is, we want to say that, therefore, if you have this guy who's Tameh and he becomes Tahor and he's shaving within the context of being a Nazir, and nonetheless those days do not count for his period of being a Nazir, then certainly a Mitzorah who's shaving as well, but it's not because he's a Nazir, it's because he's a Mitzorah, that certainly then should also not count towards his Naziris. Tashma come and here Vitime Rosh Nizro, and he becomes Tameh Bitarish Nitma Akasuf Medabashu Ton Havar Seir Vavas Tziporin, and we're saying that a Nazir Tahor who became Tameh, so then he needs to shave his head and bring birds. V'liftar is a Nazir Bakever, which would exclude a fellow who's in a cemetery when he proclaims his intent to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, that he would not need to get a haircut and he would not need to offer birds. But one second, don't we have a kavachom matar shenitma taun ha'avaras seyar? If you have a fellow who was tahor and then became tameh, he needs to get a haircut and offer birds. If you have a fellow who was already tameh when he became a Nazir, certainly then he should have to get a haircut and offer the birds. Therefore it says v'time rosh nidro. That b'misha tahor v'nitma kosum medaber, that it's Tavka talking about somebody who's tahor and became tameh, sheiton avar seir v'avas tziparin v'liftar sanozer bakever shmamina. No, Davka, if he was tahor and became tameh, that's when he needs to get a haircut and offer these korbanos. But if he was already in a cemetery when he proclaimed his intent to embark on a 30-day Nazir experience, he would not need to shave or bring these korbanos. Wow, that was Afyud Zayin, Masechet Nazir. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.